Okay, so we have, this is Wendy Vecchi, obviously, so that must be me. My archival inks, I had originally 12 colors, and now I added 3 more for this show. We added Tea Rose, we added Buttercup, which I like to call Suck It Up Buttercup, and Sky Blue. So those are my archival colors. So archival inks are permanent and waterproof when they're dry, and that's really the benefit of them. Okay, so the next thing I did with Ranger was embossing powder. So I'm going to show you this on this, and that'll be this row right here. So these are the 9 colors that we have right now. So the new colors for the show match the 3 new inks. So we have Tea Rose embossing powder, Sky Blue, and then Suck It Up Buttercup. So when we talked about the embossing powders, the guys are like, tell us what you want. And I said, well, first of all, I want mine ground super fine detail, because I like that when you stamp your image, there's no halo around it when you color it. So that was perfect. So they said, the next question is, do you want matte or do you want shiny? And I'm like, yes. And they're like, no, one or the other. And I said, well, but sometimes I want one, sometimes I want the other. And they're like, you can't do that. So I said, what is the benefit of each one? And they said, if you do a matte embossing powder, it's always going to be matte. There's no product you can add to make it shiny. So I'm like, well, I don't like that. So they said, but if you do a shiny embossing powder, you can figure out a way to make it matte. And I'm like, that I can do. So the next row, what you'll see here is completely different. So you'll see that I mix my embossing powders 50-50 ratio with Ranger's Frosted Crystal Embossing Powder.
Wow.
So what you're going to see here, it takes it from a really, really super shiny to a more matte finish, but it has a lot of texture in it. And it also seems to darken the color.
Oh.
So to me, that little jar of magic, the jar of Frosted Crystal, is it's an excellent product because it doubles your embossing paste color, or embossing powder colors. So that's really fun. And you can see there's really a huge difference, and because it's Frosted Crystal, I didn't really expect it to darken the colors, but you can see that it does because they're on the same surface as the stars. So the next thing is, when you think of embossing powders, you always think, okay, I can stamp an image and then emboss it and color it, okay? But there's so much more that you can do with that. Home decor is so popular right now, and so is altering things and mixed media. And this is a great way to customize your some products that you may have even had for a long time, like I did here. So I wanted you to know that embossing powders will work on glass. So if you look at the top left, that's Tim's corked vial, right from the package, and then covered with embossing powder. The second one is my Clearly for Art, which is my moldable plastic material, and again, that one has Tea Rose embossing powder on it. And these things will not chip off, and I'm going to tell you how to do that. So this is Fern Green, the next one, and on the bottom you can see Fern Green embossing powder. This one is my Art Parts material, which starts out as kind of a craft colored product and covered with embossing powder. This sample here is really cool. This is Ranger's texture paste right from the package, so it's white. And while it was wet, I sprinkled on the embossing powder and then blasted it with the heat tool. So that powder is actually cooked right into the paste, so it's really cool. And, you know, it's really nice to have a raised sentiment or something. I think it makes a huge impact. The next one is one of Tim's metal pieces from Ideology. So that's what it looks like from the package. And here it is covered with Suck It Up Buttercup. I know, it's just, so things you've had for a long time, you can coordinate now for any project, so it's really fun stuff. You can die cut it and just do sections of it. You can cover a whole sheet with embossing powder, use your punches on it, and make your own little embellishments with it. This is a new product that I have called Matte Minis, and these are little laser cut matte board pieces, and they take embossing powder really well, so that's Orange Blossom. And then this one is Tim's letterpress right from the package, and here it is covered with embossing powder. So a lot of different options, and there's a lot more than this, but I have 9 powders, so I wanted to show you 9 colors. But you can also do it on chipboard, grunge board, just plain old cardstock. It's just a really fun way to change the things you have. So those are the little samples. So I wanted you to take it a little bit further and show you what else you can do with this. So this is just a glass leftover jar from a honey that we got in a gift basket. So this is covered with my embossing powder. So the key to doing this is you want to use the archival ink as your base. So use your blending tool, add archival ink to the surface, and then sprinkle on your embossing powder. And the archival ink will hold it securely. It just kind of cooks it right onto the surface. which is really cool. Yeah, when I first started, I thought, okay, embossing powder, embossing ink, those two should work together. And what happened was when I put the embossing powder on and blasted it with the heat tool, it worked. And then I noticed a little crack in it, and I thought, well, I'll just heat it again with the heat tool. And what happened was, when I grabbed my heat tool, the crack was bigger, and I just stood there and waited, then the crack got bigger and bigger, and the whole thing peeled off. So I figured out, okay, I still want to do this, so I have to have another plan, and Archival ink works perfectly. So these pieces have been shipped all over, and they are perfectly fine. It's actually like cooked onto the surface. Okay, so that is on glass. And I'll pass it around so you guys can see how it's on there. This is Tim's cute little clock. Same principle with this. I use Archival ink, tapped it on with the blending tool, and you have to work in sections on this thing. Sprinkle on your embossing powder, and then it's on metal.
Do you color match, so you'll use the coordinating Archival with?
I do. 99% of the time. Sometimes I don't, because I like to see what else is going to happen. I also have a wood frame here. So this was just a basic black wood frame. This is what it started out as. And same thing with this one. I worked on one side at a time, so I took my tree branch Archival ink, tapped it on just one section, and then I sprinkled on my tree branch embossing powder. And before I heated it, I like to take my finger and just kind of wipe off some certain sections so that it looks a little more vintage. You don't have to do that. If you want it perfect, you can do that. But I really like the kind of more worn effect. That's more my style. So that's why you see the little bits of black peeping out through here though. And you can see on wood again, it's perfectly on there. This has been shipped all over again too. And it's actually like cooked onto the wood.
Yeah. And you even did the spoon.
Yeah, so I did. This is a little metal spoon, so that's also done with the embossing powders. This is my Clearly for Art that I showed you on the sample. So this, so it's a flexible, but the embossing powder won't chip off. This is actually Tim's little tattered florals that I die cut from foam core, and that's covered with embossing powders, so that works. And there's the letterpress again.
Cool.
So yeah, it's so much fun. Once you start looking at this stuff, it's like, oh my God, I'm going to do everything. That jar was actually in the trash and I had to dig it out. So this is on art parts, and if you look at the little bricks, I have a brick stencil, and I wanted a way to have a brick colored embossing powder. So I thought, ooh, I should have had one, but then I thought, no, we have enough colors, we can make our own. So what I did was, I started with red geranium embossing powder, and I added an equal amount of orange blossom. So I thought those two would make a nice color. Well, it still needed a little bit of something. So I added in some watering can, just a little bit, and then I used the magic bottle of frosted crystal. So the effect is this.
Cool.
So it actually looks like authentic brick. And it's on there, if you bend the tag, it's not going to chip off. And it's really cool. So this is what it looks like in the container. You guys can look at that if you want to. This is what it looks like in the container. So you can actually see, you can see red geranium in there, you can see some orange blossom in there. The little dark spots are going to be the watering can powder. And then the white that you see is actually the frosted crystal. So normally when I do it, I do a 50-50 ratio. So I took 1 scoop of this, 1 scoop of this, so I took 2 scoops of that. And then I just sprinkled in a little bit of the watering can. And you can kind of adjust it. If you wanted it to be redder, just add a little bit more red geranium. So it's really, that was really fun. So I have a couple more options I want to try too when I have a few minutes.
Wendy, did you say you did that with a stamp or a stencil?
What?
The brick.
That's a stencil.
A stencil.
That's a stencil. Okay, so that was that. So I wanted to show you too how the faux granite ware technique works, because that's really fun. So I'm going to use my new matte minis here. Like I said, I normally choose the same color. Sorry guys. I'm going to choose the same color ink and embossing powder, so I use cornflower blue. So originally when I started playing with this stuff, I wanted to make an enamel accent. So if you just ink your surface with the Archival ink, and this is a 2-part flower pot, so I only have to dip the bottom half because it's going to be covered up on the top. And there's my embossing powder stuck on my surface. Now because I like vintage, I like to take it and just kind of wipe the edges off so it looks like it's been worn, but you don't have to do that. Okay, and then I'm just going to blast it with the heat tool. This is where you really appreciate Ranger's heat tool because it's so quiet. This guy is loud, but it works really, and it's really fast, so for demos it's really good. Okay, so now you can see I have this beautiful blue kind of enamel pot. So if your customers like bright colors, you can stop right there. I like, again, more vintage, so I'm going to add some potting soil ink to this. And this is optional, but I like it. This is also another way to change your embossing powder colors after it's already been cooked. If you go over with potting soil, potting soil will work with any of the colors to tone it down. I thought it would be tree branch, but it's really potting soil is the one that's perfect for every color. So I'll just do part of it so you can see how it changes the color. And if I heat set that, then that's going to be permanent on there. So I'll just kind of go over the whole thing. You could just do the edges if you wanted to. And I don't dry this ink, and I'll tell you why. When I go over this with my Glacier White, some of that ink is going to be absorbed into the white, so it kind of tones it down. It's not so stark. So if you had Snowcap White pigment before, Glacier White is the same thing. So the pigment line has been rebranded. So this is the new one, exactly the same ink as before. So now I'm just going to take my spatter stamp on here, and I have a full granite ware. So I'll just give this a quick blast, and then that white ink is permanent on there. So that is exactly how I did the other pieces. And then I would finish it off, obviously, with the extra little piece on top, but I'm not going to make you watch that. But then this would fit on the top of there, and there's my little dimensional flower pot. Oops, okay. Any questions or anything I can tell you? No? Okay. So if you were at the last VIP event, I demoed my Archival reinkers with rubbing alcohol. I showed you that technique on specialty stamping paper. Do you remember that? The solution does not soak through the specialty stamping paper, so the benefit of that is if you're doing art journal pages, your back is clean when you turn the page and start again. So I told you that was the only surface it worked on, but what I wanted to do was to figure out a way to use it on manila tags, because that's what everybody uses a lot. So I finally figured it out. So I'm going to use, let's see here, switch colors. And you don't have to use the reinkers if you're working on a small surface. If I'm doing a large art journal page, I still think the reinkers are, it's a better deal. But on small surfaces, this is good. So this is tree branch, and this will be hydrangea. But you would think this would be an ugly color combination. Purple and brown would make yuck, but it's probably one of my most favorites. So now I have just regular rubbing alcohol that I'm going to just kind of spritz on here. And you want to use plenty. Rubbing alcohol is cheap, so don't be skimpy. So where I went wrong before was I did not take the time to mix those colors into the alcohol. So when I set my tag on here, that ink sucked right into it, and I had no chance to manipulate it. So you just want to use your palette knife and just make sure that the ink is mixed in with the alcohol. And here's what you'll see. The minute the tag touches the solution, it starts to suck up all that fluid. And I like a lot because you can kind of puddle some on here, and that way you can create drips. Oops. So now I'll just go ahead and dry it. And if you use enough alcohol, I think the reason I like a lot of alcohol is because you can create drips and you create more of a pattern. You kind of blow it around with the heat tool. And this is going to be permanent when it's dry because it's an archival ink. Even though I added alcohol to it, it's still permanent. So the thing I wanted you to see here, if we would do this with just water, this tag would have been a big ugly mess now, right? When this dries, it is velvet smooth. There's no pilling of the paper. It's absolutely perfect. Sorry, this is loud. So you'll see that it's not quite dry, it's still a little bit damp, but it's not, there's no pilling in it, it's not warped. It'll be completely flat when it's dry. And this is permanent, so you know this pattern is always going to stay here. So if you want to alter it, you can still add distress over the top of it, and darken it, but that pattern is still going to be on here.
It's pretty.
It's cool, isn't it? And it's another way to use your archival inks on a tag. Okay, any questions, or what else can I tell you? Nothing. You guys are so quiet. Everybody else is like, what about this? What about this? What about this? Oh, I have one special request too. Ranger had a product called Glue and Seal, which I totally loved, and then they discontinued it on me, and I flipped out. And every time I talk to them, I'm like, please bring back Glue and Seal. I want Glue and Seal. I want Glue and Seal. And they did finally. So you guys have to buy it so I'm not in trouble. So the reason I like Glue and Seal is it's the best paper adhesive in the world, and this is not my product. I make not a penny off of it, and I don't care because it is the best paper adhesive in the world. So this is a sheet of my Clearly for Art, which is my plastic kind of flexible material that I covered with just newsprint. So I took a whole sheet of Clearly for Art and I painted on my Glue and Seal. I put my paper on here, kind of brayered it on here, and dried it. And you'll see there's no bubbles in here at all.
Yeah.
And I used to do this with vintage dictionary paper, which is even thinner, but then I kind of got tired of dealing with the text, so I switched to newsprint. So this is an awesome surface, and you can see there's not a bubble on it. And multi-medium does not do that because they're like, just use multi-medium. I'm like, it's not the same, guys. This is like the best product for adhesive paper in the world. So if I'm going to put paper on art parts, on chipboard, you can do a little mini book, always Glue and Seal. So buy some so I'm not in trouble. Buy lots of it. Yes, okay. Okay, questions or what else can I tell you? The one thing I want you to remember, if you're going to do any of these projects like that, you have to use the Archival ink to hold your embossing powder on. Like I said, the embossing inks do not hold it on permanently. And this is actually like pretty much baked onto the surface.
Yeah, it looks like enamel.
Yeah, it does, and it looks like enamel. And your stamping doesn't have to be perfect. And I like to use an unmounted stamp, especially because you can move it around curved surfaces. So as much as I love wood-mounted stamps, they're like art in themselves. I think they're just beautiful. But that's kind of a benefit of having unmounted stamp, is that you can just bend it to fit wherever.
Cool.
And I have a large spatter stamp, but we came out with a little full granite set, a starter set that includes this stamp because it's easier to work with a smaller one than a large 6x6 background stamp, especially when you're working on little pieces like that. It's just like I'll just do this. So that's good. So key things are the Archival ink, the embossing powder, and you want to make sure you use snow-capped pigment ink. The last group asked if you could use paint instead. I did try that, but it didn't look authentic. It looked too perfect. So I like this look a lot, and the Glacier White is just what you need for that.
Did you put a different color in there?
Yes, you can alter, like I showed you with the potting soil. I'll just take potting soil again and just kind of wherever I want it to look worn, just kind of hit it with the blending tool with ink. And that will stick to there. Once it's dry, it's permanent. And that's really the benefit of the Archival. So the benefit of Archival, waterproof and permanent when it's dry, but it's a perfect companion for Tim's inks because they are water. They react with water. So oil and water don't mix, and that's why they're the perfect combo to work together.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes. Make sure embossing powder holders. Those are great.
Those came from TJ Maxx and and Marshalls. And Marshalls. Yeah,
Okay.
And like Marshalls, like if you go in the kitchen section, that's where I found them. And they have them on Amazon, but they're like maybe 3 of them for $10 or $12. These are $6 for 3 when you find them there.
Great size and
Yes,
very
they are.
handy.
It's a convenient system, but we came out with just the little jar for customers. I mean, this is very convenient for me to demo, but customers, this is a really nice way to mix your own embossing powders. So I showed you the brick color, so customers could easily mix that in here and store it in here. Put your little label on top.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.